Well, first of all, good morning, everyone. Very warm welcome to Microsoft on behalf of our leadership team here in the UK. Thank you for taking time out of your diary. I know, I guess working with public sector customers every day of the week, how busy everyone is in actually trying to understand what digital transformation means to the public sector. So I guess a little bit today what I'd like to take you through is kind of Microsoft's vision on what we think digital transformation means in the public sector. Create some of the world context around that, why it should be important. I know the other challenge that certainly CIOs that I engage with who have great ambition for what technology can do in their organization, sometimes getting your executive teams to move at the same pace that you'd like to move at can be incredibly challenging, and you're constantly having to create the case for the role that digital can play within your organization. So genuinely we believe there's a case there where almost we need to educate some of the senior executives across government. I'll talk a little bit about this concept of that we're going through the fourth industrial revolution. And this came a little bit from the World Economic Forum that was run in Davos earlier this year. It was the big theme of the event. We're all familiar with the previous industrial revolutions that actually the UK was at very much at the center of, certainly the first two. Suddenly we found new ways to drive mass production in the UK economy, which whether you sort of look back fondly at a British Empire or not, or look back slightly embarrassed in terms of some of the things that we did to the world, no matter what, it drove a massive amount of technology innovation, because that's what it was. So first of all, we had steam and water leading to large-scale mechanical production. Then as we moved to the late part of the 19th century, really thinking about how labour got used more efficiently in the workplace, led to the generation of some what are still great consumer brands like Ford with the Model T, the concept of actually developing a car on a production line. Probably started in the US and then perfected by the Japanese. And of course then the wave that Microsoft got very much involved in, the electronics and IT industry, and this concept of more automated production. We had a vision of a desktop, a PC on every desktop and in every home, and pretty much a vision for us that got delivered. But it wasn't just about landing those devices or landing Windows or landing Office. It was actually about making everyday tasks for the individual, and then to a certain extent the organization a lot more easy. And now we're talking about this fourth industrial revolution, which is the idea that pretty much the physical world that we live in and the digital world that we all experience has pretty much blurred. The boundaries of those worlds has blurred. We're at a stage now, I don't know how many of you have kids, but I have kids of various ages. Teenagers are always interesting. I had the pleasure at the end of last year of presenting an award at the Civil Service Awards. It was the 10th anniversary of the event. So the event was held in Buckingham Palace, and the event was hosted by the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh. So, I went to present an award, but I got an opportunity not to have much one-on-one time with the Queen, but just to actually see the Queen was pretty cool. And it was interesting, it was getting towards the time I was actually flying back. I live in Edinburgh, I was flying back home, and the Queen is not as mobile as she once was. So she was taking her time to get along this particular lineup of people to shake hands with, and I was getting quite close to my flight time, and I was going, do I actually ditch the Queen here and go and get my flight? But she made it along, and I had a name badge on, similar to the badges you guys have today. And she just looked at the badge and said, "Who are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm Derrick McCourt. I work for Microsoft." "Oh, Microsoft." She said, young people these days always walking around going, what's it all about? So if the proliferation of devices, the blurring of the physical and digital divide has reached Her Majesty the Queen in her 90s, that probably suggests how real it is in the world around us. We have a very similar challenge in Microsoft. We have new millennials joining our organization who absolutely expect to have wonderful technology services. They expect to be social from day one. Email is old hat to them. In many ways, some of the skills that they've developed over time, we actually bring them back into a very 10, 15 years ago type of existence. So that's the world that we live in. And how do we embrace that as leaders within the technology industry? The other incredible thing that's happening is the pace of change going on in the world around us. Historically, it took 20 years for a typical Fortune 500 company to reach a market capitalization of $1 billion. We think of Google as an organization that has had massive growth. Ourselves and Google are constantly vying for the number 2 or number 3 capitalized company in the world. It took them 8 years to become $1 billion company. Look at an organization like Uber. I had my first real experience of using Uber and depending on Uber when I had a holiday in Northern California this year, and nobody gets taxis. You know, it is Uber. It's just if you don't use Uber, you essentially don't get around. It took them 4 years to become $1 billion business. This is an organization that is now the biggest taxi company in the world, but doesn't own a single vehicle. This is an organization, the biggest taxi company in the world, doesn't employ a single driver. So a completely different model. You look at Airbnb, 3 years to become $1 billion organization, the biggest real estate company, effectively, in the world, and they don't own a single property. So the whole sort of reinventing of the role that technology plays in disrupting business is incredible, but also the pace that these organizations can grow at. You look at other things in terms of access to technology, the way technology is democratizing almost the world around us. You look at the type of functionality that you can now get in a $10 off-the-shelf phone. That kind of phone would have cost $500 in 2007. So in 10 years, that's the way the market has shifted. Something like DNA sequencing, to get your own individual DNA profile. The kind of research that happened to produce that for the first time back in the year 2000 cost $2.7 billion to produce. You can now go onto the web and get your personal DNA profile for $250. The exact same outputs that cost $2.7 billion only just over 15 years ago. So it really leads to the type of pace of changes going on in the world, but how does that actually impact how we deliver services out to our customers, out to the internal people in your organizations? This is a piece of work that was done at by McKinsey that kind of looks at what is the digital future and the opportunity for a digital future in every organization, and what is the maturity of where organizations and where individual industries are at in terms of how they're either embracing technology or how they're adopting technology in their organization. And you see very traditionally technology-led industries at the top. So you've got a set of, categories across the top. So the kind of assets that an organization has, how digital is being used, and how it's having impact on the workforce themselves. And obviously very technology-rich industries like ICT itself, like media services, like professional services, have really adapted and adopted to technology. Heavy spending on technology, really looked at how they automate business processes and the engagements that they have with their customers, and really invested in their people in terms of the type of digital skills that they need to have in a modern workforce. We start to get down more to the bottom of the table. And we see that in the McKinsey view of the world, probably the areas where there has been least investment has been in government and healthcare. Per I guess percentage of the overall spend made by those organizations. The least investment that's been made in the digital skills that's required amongst the people in those organizations, again, is in government and healthcare. And the least advantage that's been taken in terms of how we interact with the citizen, how we automate process, again, has been within government and healthcare. Now that probably isn't a surprise to anybody in the organization, but obviously today you're hearing about some great customer examples of organizations who've made those investments and had the kind of returns. But actually for us in this industry, it means there's a tremendous amount of white space and opportunity for us to work together and improve things. What I would also say, this is a global survey. I would say the UK is absolutely the lead in this space in government and healthcare, government in particular. In fact, some of the work that we do with our local government customers, when we take customers to executive briefings in our global headquarters in Redmond and Washington State, very often about a third of the examples that are talked about are examples from UK customers, which seems an awful waste of time, bringing our customers the whole way to the US to talk about UK examples. And I'm delighted with the quality of the customers who are talking today about how they have driven digital transformation. But what I would say, if we look to the commercial world, this is a Gartner survey of CEOs in global Fortune 500 organizations. 86% of CEOs consider digital their number one priority. And you think of these global companies, all of the challenges that they face, things like urbanization, the lack of resource availability in the world, the impact of climate change, the shift in global economic power, China, India knocking at their door, the demographic shifts that you all face in your roles working in the public sector. The number one thing, a priority within their organization is digital. How they embrace digital actually to manage all of that other change that's going on in the world. And this is the one thing that can help transform the way their organization engages with that outside world. Think about your CEO. Think about the CEOs across local government, healthcare, et cetera, in the UK. What percentage of those CEOs have digital as their number one priority? Would anybody, let me just do a show of hands, how many in the room think this is the number one priority of their CIO? Nobody in the room, okay. So that in turn says that we've really got to make a step change here. That there is a role for technology to play. And if I'm the chief executive of a health trust in the UK, and I've spoken to many over the last 24 months, generally their number one priority is nobody dying unnecessarily on their watch on a particular day. That seems like a pretty good priority to have. Generally number two priority is making a budget that's pretty much impossible to deliver, to be delivered. 80% of health trusts in the UK were in budget deficit last year, so a big priority. After that, it's generally waiting lists and making sure that the silly number of targets that are landed on individual leaders get delivered in some shape or form. But think of the role that digital can play in delivering those core priorities. If we can support the leadership in our organizations to think more about digital as being a core strategy, a core part of that delivery, then I think we're onto something. And the role for those in this room who are technology leaders within those organizations is to elevate that conversation. So in Microsoft, we've been thinking a lot about what our role is in supporting our customers, supporting these CEOs, supporting the world to really embrace technology. 2.5 years ago, we had a new chief executive. I've now been with Microsoft for 15 years, so it was my first new chief executive in the whole time I was here. So Satya Nadella is our global CEO. There are a few immediate changes in the organization. First of all, Satya is not American, so that's quite different. In the first email that he sent out to the company, he quoted Oscar Wilde, so an Irish poet. That was pretty cool. He talked about cricket and how much he was, a fan of cricket, but actually the strategy involved in cricket, how it shaped the way he is as a thinker. So that probably lost about half our employees who are American and didn't even know what cricket. Of course, he's a bald guy with glasses, so immediately I had a connection with him. But it's been such a change in our organization. Such an empowering change. And Satya's overall vision of what Microsoft is about as an organization is empowering every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. So finding the one or two things that technology can enable them to achieve more in the world that they live in. It's a global ambition, so it's every organization and every person on the planet. So it is a big, bold ambition. So we take our interaction with each of you and each of the clients that you serve internally, each of the citizens that you serve internally, that technology will have a positive impact on what they achieve in their lives. There is a context in the world that we live in Microsoft as well. This is a world, as Her Majesty the Queen spotted, that is a mobile-first world. The people are always on devices. It's quite incredible. The Ofgem, in their recent survey, said that the average UK citizen spends 11 hours a day interacting with a screen. That's a long time set in front of a device. And you think about it, it's not unreasonable between the amount of TV that people watch, the amount of time they spend in front of a tablet. In fact, sometimes they've got multiple screens going. You know what it's like. You're watching TV, you're surfing at the same time. And of course, the time you spend in front of a screen during the workday. So this is mobile first, where people expect mobile experience. And then there's this concept of cloud first. And whether people know it or not, they are massive consumers of cloud services. Facebook was one of the companies that was accelerated growth to a $1 billion company. It's entirely a cloud service, but not one person who uses Facebook, Snapchat, Twitter, whatever it may be, thinks, where is my data stored? How is this service being provided? They just expect it to be ubiquitous on whichever device that they choose. We didn't create that world exists, and Microsoft has to have the right products and services within that, frankly, to survive in that world. So we've got three bold ambitions that we're looking to deliver for us to be successful in that world, but us to deliver that vision of every person and organization achieving more. The first thing that we talked about is reinventing productivity and business processes, really trying to change and disrupt the way that organizations think about the technology interaction from their clients, think about how individuals within the organization become more productive. For us, we have products today that sit in the space. We have things like Office 365, we have things like Dynamics that we believe will improve productivity in an organization. But we're also thinking about new services, bringing online new paradigms of computing, things like conversation as a service, where you can have intelligence built into your organization, where you can have robotics in the organization, so you think of the interaction of somebody to healthcare, that they can go on and perhaps get a first level diagnosis through a robotics engine rather than having to go to see their GP. So imagine a world in 10, 15 years time where you're feeling a bit of a chesty cough coming on, you go on to an NHS portal, you have a conversation with a engine who gives you a diagnosis. Perhaps you have a personal testing kit that takes a swab or whatever, or you can take that to your local pharmacy, get something tested, and automatically you get a prescription off the back end of that. And I've never actually have to interact physically with a GP. And these are all the kinds of technologies that we're looking to work on and bring to the fore. And to a certain extent, we're creating the platforms to do this. And the ideas of how these platforms will help people achieve more will actually come from many of our customers. We will show you how to use the platforms. We will certainly give some insight in terms of how they can be used, but the creativity will come from within your organizations. Then we talk about this concept of building the intelligent cloud platform. So first of all, we are making massive investments globally to create the kind of computing scale that organizations have ever dreamt of. And in the case of our public sector customers, if I look at, for example, our customers who work on national security, their only barrier to making the UK more secure is having more compute power. So organizations like ourselves who are making massive investments in cloud platforms can give access to just a scale of computing that's never been available before. We're also changing the paradigm of how you as organizations can invest in technology. Previous, the barrier to having great technology was the kind of capital investment that was needed to get on board. This is absolutely we're making the investment in capital up front so that you can consume services at a service rate. So that's a very important shift. Should be a positive piece of news for our customers, but of course, historically, the public sector has always had to go and get capital to go deliver on projects. So actually shifting to something that's a little less predictable can be challenging for our customers, and we recognize that. But think of us as the organization that's now making the massive capital investments in technology so that you don't have to. And then there's this concept of creating more personal computing. And again, I'm not sure Her Majesty would be keen on more personal computing being available out there. But we're really, again, if we think that the way that we're going to be interacting with technology in 15, 20 years' time is going to be through a 4.5-inch screen stuck to our hand, it's not going to be. There will be new paradigms in terms of how we interact with technology. We are pushing very hard our HoloLens product, which talks about the idea of augmented reality, where you have digital experiences within your sphere of vision with touch and so on, which is a very different way of looking at things. And our research folks are working on lots of different ways in terms of how people will interact with the physical world through the digital world. So these are the three things that we're working on. It will ultimately mean cool products coming out, but the job that we have to do with you, our customers, is to make sure you understand the roadmaps and the kinds of things that are coming further down the line so that you can build your organizations to embrace some of that technology. I would say the other big thing that Satya has brought to our organization is a much more humble Microsoft, an organization that certainly is still very ambitious. So we talk about this concept of a growth mindset, but it's more of a positivity about the organization, a real can-do attitude. He's really driving us to be customer obsessed, that everything that we do, everything we think about has the customer at the core of what we do. We want to be an organization that's diverse and inclusive, that, for example, that we have a workforce that really reflects the society that we live in. And Microsoft, very historically, we're a big multinational company with big teams. You know what? There have been lots of fiefdoms in that team. So just similarly to the kind of challenges you have culturally, getting Department A, working in Department B, we've had all of that stuff as well. And Satya's done a great job of breaking that down. And we talk to customers a lot about the cultural journey that we've been on. And that can be very often a great conversation as a board-to-board conversation between our organization. But the number one thing that Satya and Microsoft has us think about is how we make a difference in the world around us. We do a staff survey once a year where we get anonymous feedback from our teams and what they think of working for Microsoft or working within the team that they work in. And actually, this is the one thing that always came out in the team that I lead in the public sector, the word difference. came out in the Wordle, which is quite different to a lot of the other Microsoft teams. I always tell people I have the best job in Microsoft in the world. First of all, I get to work in the UK marketplace that I talked about, which is embracing a lot of the technology that we're talking about here. It's one of our leading, the public sector in the UK is one of our leading cloud markets in the world. So people are really embracing this idea of adopting consumer technology in the workplace. But I also get to work with some amazing customers on the kind of digital transformation journey that they're going under, and which really does make a difference to what they deliver to our citizens in the UK. So thinking about what digital transformation, or what we think digital transformation means for our customers and the role that we have to play, and why we're building those 3 platforms that I talked about. We really talk about this cycle of building technology that first of all allows you to engage your citizen, then allows you to empower your employees, optimize your own organization, and then the ultimate is how you transform your products and services. And did you really think, as I'm a public sector customer, do I really think that I have a set of products and services that I bring? I'll talk about some examples where I think that's very much the mindset that I think we need to have within the public sector. So if I take those in more detail, you'll hear different examples today, and different organizations will start their journey on digital transformation at very different points, because it can be that you need to drive some kind of short-term win to show that there's a change going on within your organization. Probably the piece that I've seen most prevalent, particularly in local government, has been in the space of empowering your employees. This concept of creating a mobile, flexible workforce that's digitally enabled, that isn't centered around everybody existing in this big headquartered building, that actually allows employees to have some kind of device that gets them on the road, that's actually connected. So if I work in social care, rather than feeling that I have to come into the office in the morning, getting handed a big wad of notes, taking those out in the road, filling in all the details, taking them back at the end of the day, filling in all of the internal systems, that I have a mobile system that allows me to move around in the organization. That has great return to the organization because it reduces the desk space, reduces the number of physical buildings that have to be supported, and can allow just a massive financial return to the organization. And I know a great many of you in the room have been through that cycle already. But as we've engaged with customers, people who create that kind of mobile flexible workforce, see their staff engagement scores going up considerably, see the kind of citizen engagement scores that they measure going up quite considerably because of the empowerment given to employees. Engaging citizens can take many different forms. I was with the digital transformation team at Ministry of Justice last week, who have really bought into cloud computing in a big way. Really supportive of the Government Digital Service Cloud First platform. They have created what they call a common platform, they've chosen our cloud for it. But their concept of citizen engagement is a very different type of citizen engagement, because most of the citizens that the justice system engages with are not voluntary in any shape or form. In both ways, because it could be perpetrators of a crime, it can be victims of a crime. There's nobody wakes up in the morning and decides, I know I want to be part of the justice system, other than, of course, the legal profession, who make a few quid off the back of it. But they're thinking about how technology can absolutely transform the engagement with the citizen, but ultimately transform the product and service of what justice means in the UK. So if you take the biggest cost waste that the justice system has in the UK, is evidence gets produced for a crime, somebody gets accused of a crime, they get charged with a crime, and very often, if you've been charged with a crime, and thankfully I've never been charged with a crime, so I'm not speaking from personal experience, you get to the point where you've got to decide a plea of guilty, not guilty. And the default position of most of the legal profession is to recommend to their client that they plead not guilty. And the reason for that is generally somewhere in the chain of command, in the evidence trail, something can go wrong. And quite honestly, you can get lucky and actually you can get to the day of your trial and some piece of evidence that's critical or a witness or whatever it may be isn't available, hasn't turned up, and you get to walk. By using technology and actually capturing the evidence digitally, then the evidence can be presented to the accused much earlier in the process. So you imagine a system where the accused actually gets to log onto a portal and actually gets to review with his solicitor the evidence. That means many more pleas will actually happen earlier in the process. They won't happen on the day where somebody turns up in court, sees the evidence, the final evidence for the first time. The court's already been booked for the 2 or 3 days that's required for the trial. The jury's already been sworn in. The judge's time has already been taken up. The solicitors and barristers are already going to get paid. Obviously, much less stressful experience for anybody who's been a victim of crime. A much more efficient experience for the person who's been accused, either rightly or wrongly, of the crime, and then just a massive cost saving to the legal system itself. But the number one thing that's driving them isn't the optimizing the organization piece. It's actually the engagement with the citizen, that it is just a much more stress-free experience for the victims of crime. In terms of a great many of our customers, the first space that we engage with them on is optimizing their organization and actually taking the IT organization as the first point that we can help and support optimization. Again, you will hear of examples of that today. One of the best stories that I have is with a higher education institution. They were engaged with one of the big 4 consultancy organizations about IT transformation. Genuinely wanted to make a step change in the technology experience for the students coming in to their organization. The initial proposition from I'll say the then CIO, because he's not the CIO anymore, was to invest in a couple of paired local data centers for the university. That was a £20 million investment, capital investment for the organization. Fortunately, one of the big 4 consultancy house understood the cloud proposition, and in a board meeting where they were potentially going to approve this £20 million investment, went, whoa, have you considered cloud as a proposition? And of course, the leaders in the organization really didn't know what cloud was. The Big 4 consultancy organization engaged with ourselves and one of our partners, and we looked at a business case in terms of using cloud for this technology transformation, both shifting a whole ton of existing assets from a creaking existing data center into the public cloud, but creating a whole new set of student services, again, leveraging cloud assets. Our customer has made a substantial commit to the Microsoft data center. For us, there is a £500,000 investment per annum in terms of the cloud space that they need to run that service. But a £500,000 a year investment running cost with no capital investment versus a £20 million capital investment was a significant return for that customer. Plus, we were able to find a couple of student services that we were able to get online during the summer period so that the student experience returning in September is very much a different experience rather than all the hassle of actually the build out of a new data center. So, there are lots of great examples, as I said, that you're going to hear today across this. But I thought I would play a video of a customer that's really impressed me in terms of how their organization has embraced the cloud. This is NHS Blood and Transplant. Ian, the chief executive, will talk about how they've leveraged technology to drive what digital transformation means for them. I think it's a great example because it's one that anybody can talk to. We've all used the blood transfusion service at some point in our lives, either as a donor, potentially as a recipient. But this really talks to the four boxes that I talked to earlier. So I'll just play the video. And that didn't work. Across the, when you say across the other screen, yeah.
NHS Blood and Transplant employs just over 5,000 people, and it offers the blood service for England and the organ donation and transplant service for the whole of the United Kingdom. One of the things that we've done recently is improve the experience that donors receive when they book appointments. We've now created an app and an online booking service, and because it's in the cloud, is incredibly flexible. So what we were finding was that every time a celebrity went on the television and talked about blood donation, our contact centre would just be overwhelmed. That simply doesn't happen anymore.
I have the NHS Blood and Transplant app on my phone, and I just book the appointment on there. It encourages a lot more younger people to donate. And I know me and my brother both told my dad as well to start using the app, so I think our whole family donates now.
People could register to be a donor, and it could take up to a month for them to get access to the website. We went from there to seeing a donor registering to be a donor early hours of the morning, donating blood later that day. We had around 20,000 donors using the old website. We're now over 1.1 million donors that have access to our digital service and using it on a daily basis.
We're the first blood service in the world actually to sequence people's DNA for the purposes of stem cell transplants. With the cloud, we're able just to store and manipulate enormous amounts of data, volumes of which we simply couldn't do if we were using on-premise technology. What that means is we can get a sample to a hospital within a matter of days, whereas before it used to take many months to achieve the same objective. And with patients who've got things like leukemia that need stem cell transplants, days do really matter.
Since being diagnosed with cancer, I've had a stem cell transplant, and I've received things like platelets, antibodies. So I think anything that makes it more accessible, more viable, definitely, it's got to be a good thing.
We can find, in some cases, somewhere between 10 and 100 times normal traffic can happen in a space of 30 seconds to a minute. So the ability to cope with that is what really attracts us to the cloud. That's cut the cost of our infrastructure very significantly. We reckon we're saving about £1.2 million a year initially, and that's going to go up to about £1.5 million a year just on the booking service alone. That's going to save us an awful lot of money in the long term.
We use Azure for blood.co.uk, it hosts our content management system. It also delivers the real-time booking, our back-end systems that manage the demand plan. That's all live into Azure and delivers that digital service.
We found by working with Microsoft, it was an organisation of sufficient scale, it understood our core business needs, and frankly, we enjoyed working with the Microsoft people. Our core mission at NHSBT is to save and improve lives, and my team do that brilliantly well every single day. What we're trying to do with the technology that we're putting in place is to make that as simple as possible for my team to do their job, so they can focus on being compassionate as well as professional. And these tools give us the means to do the professional part and let them get on with being compassionate.
So you get a sense of how those three big ambitions that we have as an organisation, certainly they reinvented productivity and business processes in their organisation. I'm sure we've got some interesting stuff on the screen now. Don't even know what that stuff is. They reinvented productivity and business processes in their organisation. They created a new personal computing experience for the end client for donating blood. But if you look at the kind of scale of what they're doing with DNA sequencing and storing those DNA sequences, then building the intelligent cloud has made that possible. These are all, again, assets that we've built, that we've created, that we've made the capital investment that this customer is able to leverage on an as-a-service basis. He talks on that of a saving to his organisation of £1.2 million, but it was with Ian 2 weeks ago. They are projecting savings on top of that to the NHS of around £10 million a year, because they're actually able to reduce their cost per unit of blood in terms of what they actually charge out to the individual NHS trust. So that's amazingly exciting as well. So just a really simple example, that's up there on YouTube. Again, if you want to give a sense to a chief executive in your organization of what's possible in terms of digital transformation, I think it's one of those really interesting stories. Microsoft, on top of that, we're very committed to the UK. We're really excited last week to announce the general availability of our UK data centers. So that means, as well as giving you global cloud scale, we now can give you the guarantee of data residency within the UK. I know that's important for many of our customers. So that set of services is now live. We've actually been working with a set of public sector customers who had live workloads in that data center as we've been building it out. So we had around 40 UK public sector customers in the data center testing it with us, making sure that it was ready for that go live. So again, this is part of our investment of trying to break down the barriers to ensure that every one of our customers can have trust in the public cloud model and leverage it specifically for your business. I guess the final thing to talk about, just at a very practical level, we're wanting to invest in our customers and invest in areas of the cloud that may be of interest to you. So for any one of our customers, we're very happy through partners like Shaping Cloud to invest in proof of concepts so that you can get cloud going in your organization, or perhaps if you've just dipped your toe in the water initially and have maybe done something very simple like infrastructure, a bit of infrastructure, or put up a few VMs. But if you actually want to get a few proper workloads going in the organization, we will fund this 4-day proof of concept through one of our great partners on one of these type of workloads, and we can work on you on scoping of what landing those workloads look like in your organization. So if that's of interest to you, you'll be able to reach out to Shaping Cloud. Afterwards, reach out to any of my team that are here today to talk about your interest in any one of those workloads. So I guess in summary, this is a time where digital has never been more important in the global economy in terms of the UK as part of that global economy, but in terms of the role it can play within the public sector. You have an amazing opportunity as leaders in the technology industry within the public sector to shape the future. We want to be an amazing partner to you in supporting you on that journey. We're making significant investments to make that happen locally here in the UK. And the final thing I would say is we have amazing partners like Shaping Cloud who really understand how to help you with digital transformation, but in particular, their strength is helping you understand what the journey to leverage these great public cloud assets looks like. So my ask to you would be, be strong and bold leaders in your organization. If we do this event in a year's time, let's have 86% of you putting their hands up and saying that your chief executive sees digital transformation as their #1 priority. Be an agitator in your organization and leverage us, use us to support you in that. Wish you a great event for the rest of the day. Get to understand the great case studies that you're going to hear, because there truly is some wonderful digital transformation happening. So thanks, everyone.